Welcome to another episode of An Inside Job, War on Addiction. I'm your host, Ron, and I usually start with this. Well, I thank LATV because without them, this would be nothing. This wouldn't happen because they're so supportive. To move on, a guy that put this, gave me the inspiration to do this. His name is Dr. Gabor Mate, and I won't go in how it began, but his book is Realm of the Hungry Ghost, and he paid his dues to write that book. He explains addiction. Biological, chemical, neurological, physiological, medical, social, emotional, political, did I say economical, and spiritual? So, I'm going to introduce once again, and she was great to come in, Chanelle. This is going to be number 6, we think, and we're doing a documentary on it. And it is going to be with her journey through this whole thing. Maybe we should go over it quickly, you know, just to get that across. So, with that, I want to introduce Chanelle again. Like I said, this is the 6th one. She's come down 6 times, and she never refuses. This morning, she overslept, but we worked that out. So that's it. Welcome again.
Thank you.
And I just asked her again, is it all right to do the documentary on you? And she said yes. So that's that. So welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Let's go over briefly how your journey went. Not the whole thing, but just let's say when you let's see. About the methadone. Let's start there. When number show. So.
I think that one. Yeah, that one was probably the first show.
Yeah.
And I was kind of back and forth with like taking the methadone, getting off
Right.
the methadone, like the controversy within certain places of methadone. You know, are you really clean if you're on it? Are you not clean if you're on
Yeah.
it? And I kind of developed my own opinion with it. But it came down to, like, now I'm just replacing because I wasn't doing anything for my recovery. And then I started doing...
And by that you mean?
I was just taking the methadone and doing absolutely nothing.
No meetings?
No meetings, no nothing. And considered that to be some type of recovery. And then a relapse had actually come in.
You tried to kick the methadone the wrong way.
The wrong way. I kind of set it in my head that, like, you know, if I can kick dope, I can kick that, which is true, but within reason and within the right way. But with that one, it kind of, I was too, like, centered in how I'm going to do it and wasn't listening to anybody. And I did kick cold turkey, and I lasted for a little while, but just a little while. And then that started a relapse, and that started...
And when you came on the first show, you were kicking the methadone, and you told me you were very sick.
Yeah.
It's rough, huh?
Yep.
Coming off the... What's worse, methadone or heroin?
Methadone. You know, heroin, you have like a good week period of, you know, you're making friends with your bathroom, you have the
Yeah.
bone aches, you get the
Yeah.
leg tosses, the sweats, and methadone's the same thing, but a longer lasting and a little more painful with the bone aches and stuff. But both have mental aspects to it. Both have like a mental,
Yeah.
you need it, you want it, you're
Right.
gonna die without it.
Right.
But in the long run, I thought like the methadone was worse to kick at that point. And it caused a relapse. Like you just wanted that feeling of relief no
Yeah.
matter how you had to do it. But that's kind of, that was definitely the first episode on how I was kicking that.
Yeah.
And for a while I had some length of sobriety. But I was still feeling sick. It was probably a month in and I still didn't feel 100%. I had gotten past like, you know, the worst part,
Yeah.
but the anxiety was still there.
Yeah.
You know, I still wasn't sleeping right. I still didn't feel all that great. And that's where it, for me, for myself, I think it's worse than kicking heroin.
Question, because I've heard this before. How long did it take, like say the first time, or the methadone, how long did it take to get your sleep pattern back?
After taking it, a couple months. I wasn't sleeping that great to begin with.
Yeah.
But the withdrawal part, you wake up in sweats, or you just wake up anxious, or you're just not sleeping at all. And falling asleep can be a problem because you have the leg kicks going and you can't get comfortable. And
What's
so
exactly, what's the leg kicks?
it's like your leg's jerking. Like if your leg is kind of like jerking about. Or some people have bone aches. You know, I had bone aches in like my elbows and my knees and my ankles, but the kicking just kind of came from like the spasms. But it also depends on how long you've been taking the methadone.
Right.
And you know, there's some people who take a very low dose and have a really bad withdrawal. There's some people who take a very high dose and their withdrawal's tolerable. It just depends on the person.
How about you? Where were you at on that scale?
The first time I did the methadone and went cold turkey, I was at 120, which is a high dose.
Okay.
They start you off at a reasonable dose. And if you're working a program and you're going to whatever meetings you go to, if you choose to go to meetings or if you choose to do some other recovery. But I wasn't going to meetings. I didn't have a sponsor. I wasn't doing any of the literature reading. I wasn't hanging out with sober people. I was just taking the methadone. And in doing that, I just kept increasing and increasing and increasing. And it was to the point where like I wasn't withdrawing. I just wanted to get a little high every now and then. And I wasn't in a full recovery stage. There was a relapse in between it. And that's when I was still on the same dose. I was still on the 120, but then I started to go to meetings and I started to get a sponsor and I started taking out.
This was
before
when you
I
had
even
the 14
kicked.
months?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. But again, that controversy of, am I really clean if I'm on the methadone? And I personally decided that I wasn't, and that was my mistake. That was
So you thought because you'd taken the methadone that
I
you weren't
wasn't clean. Yeah, and that was my mistake. Like I listened to other people who had never experienced it versus listening to the people who have experienced it and, you know, my sponsor's opinion. And that's, again, when I decided to kick and, like, I was just done with it. And if I could kick dope, I could kick this. And it was a mistake. I don't believe that now. Now there's a personal belief that, you know, as long as you're not using what you were using or any other drug or drinking, then you are sober. It's just personally something I don't.
I agree. Do you think? Did you think? Well, of course you went out, but I don't know what I'm trying to say. Could you? It's going to be a stupid question, but could you see going on this stuff on the methadone for a long time? Would that have been easy?
Oh yeah, it would have been easy to just stay on it and continue to. It's the same as someone who's using. It's easy to take that option when you don't want to face the reality of things or get help for yourself. But I have met some people that do take Suboxone, they do take methadone, and they do great, and they're functioning in society, and they're living healthy lives, and they have families now, and some of them have the intention to get off, and some of them don't. And what I've like kind of learned is like, what am I going to do for my recovery? I personally didn't want to be on it the rest of my life. That wasn't something I wanted to do. Because it's hard, you know, if people have families, you can't just go vacation because you have to worry about, well, how am I going to dose this day?
Right.
Yes, they give you take-homes, but there's a protocol you have to follow. It could take a while. If you have an emergency, you know, and you need to leave the state or you need to leave the town, you have to set it up here and you have to set it up there. You're still being very controlled.
Yeah, you're locked in.
Right. Right. I did have a sponsor who we weighed out the options, and I still felt chemically dependent because now I'm relying on one thing to keep me feeling like a normal human being for one day.
Right.
The last time I had actually went off the methadone, I did do it the right way at one point. I went down gradually, and I kept up with meetings, and this was a long time ago, though. I don't think we actually had talked about that one. It was before I came back into Leominster.
Right.
And I went down gradually, and I went to meetings, and I hung out with sober people. And my last dose, I still was feeling okay, but I still wasn't feeling 100%. In my last dose, I kind of got very complacent. And, well, if I can get off methadone, I don't really need to do the meetings because I'm okay here in this area. I did this, I accomplished this, I'm okay here, I'm okay there. And that complacency and arrogance is what really led me down the wrong path the last time.
Right, right. And you living in a sober house, right?
There was a point I was living in a sober house, yeah.
Right.
And before I went into the sober house, I was kind of scrambling. I had just come back from New York, which was a really big run for me. And I was kind of bouncing here and bouncing there and staying with some people, and then one night staying with family, the other night staying with more people. It was very chaotic. There was no stability at that point. I did go into a sober house in my area, and it was working out for a little bit. And again, you put a bunch of women together, and we're all different personalities and different ages, different backgrounds, and things can get, you know, a little pushy and a little hectic. And in a way, it kind of gives you that
drama.
Yeah, a little high schoolish. But then again, you also build some relationships with those women too. And there are some women in there that I still communicate with. And you kind of built that bond because you're both working on the same thing.
Right.
But because of all the chaos, it does kind of push you to get your own goals going and get out of there. Unfortunately, I didn't make it out of there the way I wanted to. We talked about that in one of the episodes. That
when
complacency again.
You picked up.
I picked up. And at that point, I don't even think I was trying to hide it. I just basically thought my shit didn't stink and like, this is what I'm doing. And they have a zero tolerance policy, and they asked me to leave. And I kind of justified that as, well, now I can use, because what's the point? And went on another run, and that run ended up with an OD. And then that probably pushed me a little bit to seek treatment. There was someone in a meeting that I had gone to who, she was great. I called her and told her, like, oh, I need a ride to this place. And she said, the only place I'm bringing you is to the hospital. Like, the only place we're going is to get you help. And we went, and I didn't find the help I actually needed.
Yeah.
And that's probably due to, like, overcrowding, and they have so many people coming in that they
That's
just really...
a tragedy, though.
Right.
That's a tragedy that I know, I remember that you're there 72 hours, and they didn't do shit for you.
And there was nothing. And
I'm not going to swear.
For a while, it was like I blamed them and how dare they not help me. But the reality of it was like I had to help myself at that point. And with the overcrowding, they did their job. I mean, technically, they did their job. They did all they can do. And they gave me a list of places to call. And like it was up to me to get myself help at that point. But then it goes into like the funding. If they had more programs, it might be a little easier. If they weren't so understaffed, it might be a little easier. You know, it all went to different things that, you know, we realize that there's some things that they can do to help, and then there's some things that they just don't want to help in.
Let me interrupt. It was on YouTube the other day. AOC, Ms. Cortez, a new congressperson, and she's really stirring things up. But they were having a committee hearing, and she said a lot, but she asked, how much is in the budget for drug, the whole thing, the whole drug? The congressman says, who she was talking to, well, it's $57,000. That's all that's in there, okay? How much is the wall? And I'm not getting political. This is what we're talking about. Something like, I don't know, $1 billion,
5 billion,
millions.
something like that, yeah. Yep. Right.
We're dying at 200 a day.
Right.
Plus all the other stuff.
Right.
It's costing us, you, $1 trillion a year. $1 trillion a year. And nobody, I'm not saying nobody, but you hear very little about that.
Right.
You know, you hear about the wall and the da and the da and the da, but not a word about the epidemic. It might come out just to say it, you know. It's I hear a lot of facts about this whole thing, that we have this many and this many and this many, but lost my point again. Where was I? See if you're listening.
We were talking about like funding wise, and they have money for this, but our money for that is, so we're not talking about it. We're not being open about it.
Right.
But I think a lot of the problem with that too is there's, you know, the controversy of, is it a disease or is it a choice? And funding wise, I think that plays in, because how many people are choosing to get help and how many people are choosing to stay out. And for a while, I believe I mentioned it in a previous episode, I was on the fence of disease or choice. And realistically, I made that choice to pick up at certain points, knowing with all the information I had, with all the education I had on it, I had made the choice to pick up. And then it comes into disease. Is that something, how is our brains working on that? And I'm still really conflicted on those. But when it comes to funding, and they have the funding to actually do studies with addicts and alcoholics. But what we're choosing to do with those is the problem. There's a lot of people who, in the wintertime, if they're using, they don't want to be on the street. So what do? We go to a detox, and we use it as a revolving door.
Yeah.
And because of that, you don't want to give help to somebody who doesn't want it. They just want to be in there to escape the cold, or they don't want to be sick that day. But then you have the person who's actually dying, literally dying, because they're waiting for the bed and they truly wanted the help and they're not getting it.
Yeah.
There was a detox I had went to, and it was actually in Pittsfield when I was living over there. And they took me in and they did the treatment process. They brought me down. At that point, they treated me.
Brought you down?
Brought me down, like, dosage-wise, and, like, helped me get off everything. At that point, I was a daily heroin user and drinker. So they treated me for heroin and alcohol. But I had told, you know, the clinician there, like, I want to go into further treatment. And she was one of those who just went above and beyond, and she fought with the insurance company to keep me an extra week. And unfortunately, they just didn't have the funding to get me into a program. And for the first week or so, she kind of kept in contact of, hey, are you doing okay? Like, and it just, unfortunately, that's when I went up to New York. I had caught, you know, I had got myself into some trouble and was charges were pressed against me. I was trying to fight those, and instead of standing my ground and fighting and being an adult, I ran away to go run because the case of the efforts, and I might as well if I have nothing left. And when I had actually come back to Massachusetts, that's when I'm going to get into a program, and I'll do this and I'll do that, and just there's not enough funding to help you.
Right.
And
Here's the question, though, for me, and this Dr. Mattei has helped me so much, and some of his colleagues. Why? Why is this happening? The system is broken.
Oh, absolutely.
The system is broken, and like I said before, it's just the facts. How about a solution? Do you hear solution because this thing is, or solutions because this epidemic with 200 dying a day, maybe World War II, that figure would come up, but I doubt it. I know in Vietnam we've exceeded that thing. And, you know, brush it aside, brush it aside. No focus from us, from the politicians to everybody's so busy, you know, so busy doing their own thing. That's just the way it is now. People are running around raising a family. Right. But, you know, what was it? What was the yellow ribbons? I forget that. Anyway, it was, I believe, to welcome the troops back. Okay? I don't see any ribbons out there. I don't see nothing. But I'm preaching a little. Why aren't some of the universities working on this in any way,
Well, I think it goes to if we ignore it and pretend it's not there, then it's not really a problem. Until it actually directly hits in their family. Which if you think about statistically, at least one person knows somebody involved with drugs or alcohol who has a problem. And I mean, I've tried to ignore my problem and said if I ignore it, it's not really a problem. But I also think people who are in recovery or want recovery should be speaking up too, and hey, this is what we think is going to work, and this is how we think we can do it. I mean, realistically, again, like you said, they're busy, they're raising families, they're doing this, they're doing that, and they're running out of ideas because we only have so many options. We have detox, halfway houses,
Right.
You know, but what else do we really have?
Right. But I read this off every time. It's so complex in the environment you're coming up with that goes deep, deep inside. You don't even know. And you see it. You look around and you can see it. You know, a father that abandoned people. So how do we begin to heal ourselves?
Right.
You know, and I talked with somebody the other day, and the person said, do you feel like we, the citizens, should be paying for that whole thing, an addict? Just the whole thing. But when I said, it's costing you out of your pocket $1 trillion a year, you know, I believe that if we can begin to realize this, of course, throw some money in. If it's costing us $1 trillion, you know, how about, so the beginning of this in working on the whole thing, and we don't, they're addicts, let them do it, you know, they're less than nothing, it's all their fault, but I'll tell you, you know this, you see somebody out there when it's their kid, all right? When it's their kid, then they understand, that process where you can't do anything about it. We got 5 minutes, and then we'll go on to the next show. As always, we never had a loss for words. So we have to do something, and nobody's doing anything. It's going to be a long way in, because let me just say, because we go a long way into the woods with our addictions, and it's a long way out. It's a long way out, and we feel like, anyway, you're going to say.
Well, we were talking about funding and what else can we do, and then there's also the enabling, and like you said, until it hits somebody's kid. And
what do you mean by
the enabling part of it? Was on the news the other day. They're building. They either have built. I have to look more into it, or they're building this place where the addict can go and safely inject. So they're basically being monitored. That's not helping them. That's saying, here, you might as well do it, just not in a Wendy's bathroom. Come here. And there's nothing safe about injecting yourself. There's nothing safe about it, no matter where you are. And
of course, you take your own dope in.
Right. And you're doing it in that way. That's not helping. I think that's actually going to destroy a lot more people, because now it's saying, you're okay to do this, and now we can justify the actions.
We'll take care of you.
Right.
And that's the enabling.
Right. And instead of that's where their funding went, instead of another detox or an aftercare program. But then you have the addicts who, again, just want to get off the street for that period of time, or they're doing it to get somebody off their back, they're doing it for probation. And then you have the people who really want it. And that's where the choice comes in of, do I really want this for myself, to be a productive member of society, to stop being a menace, or do I want to continue on living the way I'm living and at some point die, because that's the inevitable. And that's where my choice had to actually come in for myself. Do I want to keep, I said menace, I can't even say menace. I just, no regard for anybody else in that selfish way. Because for myself, I was a terror to myself and to other people. And how many people did I hurt? How many people did I have up worrying all night? Is she alive today? What's going on here? What's going on there? And I had to make that choice for myself. What do I want to do with my life? Do I want to live as someone who's going somewhere, or do I want to die an active addict?
But my story, I didn't begin to understand normal for 5 years. For 2 years, I couldn't even walk right. It's, it's a long way out. And the odds are, we have 2 minutes. Odds are, if there were that stats, how many people don't go back out again? I was two and a quarter years behind the walls of AA, and that was safe. It was safe. Halfway house. Anyway, we've got to wrap it up. All right? And then we'll do the next one.
Okay.
So that's a wrap.